So after the jump to PS3, Armored Core was in an interesting spot. Armored Core 4 had the best gameplay mechanics in the franchise thus far, but was a downgrade from previous entries in almost every other way. But, as we all know by now, every new Armored Core game gets at least one expansion, and these have a long history of correcting mistakes made in the base game. So how did Armored Core 4 Answer address the problems found in AC4's design, and how did it turn out? Well, let's talk about it. And before getting too far into the video, I should mention that this is the 13th in a series of videos where I'm playing every Armored Core game for the first time and reviewing them as I go along. And while you don't have to have seen the other videos in order to enjoy this one, you'll be missing a lot of context about my personal journey with these games if you haven't seen them. So I'll have the playlist linked in the description below for those of you that want to go check those out first. But with that out of the way, Armored Core 4 Answer is a standalone expansion for Armored Core 4, released in 2008 for the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360. And let me just start by saying that I love the way that they named this game. 4 Answer is a phrase that is very important to the story and themes of the game, and FromSoftware also cleverly dropped the 4 out of the title so that it reads as Armored Core 4 Answer. And for anyone who might think that it's a convenient coincidence, the logo for the game looks like this. So yeah, they knew what they were doing, and it's clever. But getting into the game itself, 4 Answer takes a page out of Last Raven's playbook, but tweaks it a little. 4 Answer has multiple endings, only having 3 compared to Last Raven's 6, but it handles this approach a little differently. The first time that you play 4 Answer, you're going to get the game's standard ending. Then the game will loop back to the beginning, starting you in a New Game Plus setting where you'll start to replay the game like normal, but new missions have opened up that weren't available on your first run of the game. And should you choose to take them, you can get a new ending for your second playthrough, and if you go again, you can even get a new ending for your third as well. And I really like this approach. I might even go as far to say that I prefer it to Last Raven's take. While there's certainly a quality in Last Raven's all endings are available from the start and it's up to you which one you'll see approach, I really like this approach that opens up more possibilities the more that you play the game. It feels like you can get a fully satisfactory story out of a single run, but if you want to play more of the game beyond the credits rolling, there's still so much more to discover. Ultimately, which approach you prefer in this case will be completely down to your personal preference, but I really like this one. And if they continue doing multiple story paths going forward in the series, I would love to see more of them adopting this model. And as you can probably already tell, the UI is a big step up from whatever this was. And they did it without reinventing the wheel. They just took what already existed and made it actually look good this time. Not to say that there aren't small changes, like the arena matches being moved to their own new spot just below the mission select rather than being hidden away in the submenus, but the blueprint here stayed relatively unchanged while looking infinitely better and getting a handful of small quality of life changes. But getting into playing the actual game, one of the first things you might notice is that 4 Answer got a much needed visual boost compared to Armored Core 4. Not that models are pushing more polygons or anything, but it comes down to what I talked about in the AC4 video with the use of color. It's really the only noticeable difference in the visuals of these two games, and when you look at them side by side, it's like a night and day comparison. And something else that got a major buff was the movement. FromSoftware looked at Armored Core 4's retail release, said, "No, this isn't fast enough yet," and decided to take it up a notch. The quick boosts have gotten the largest buff here. Instead of being a small dodge boost, they now give you a large burst of momentum in whatever direction you use them in. And while overboosting hasn't been made any faster, they use significantly less energy than they did in AC4, meaning you can maintain that high speed for much longer than you ever could in that game. And the buffs to your next don't end there. FromSoft introduced a whole new mechanic in the form of Assault Armor. Assault Armor allows you to completely purge your primal armor, resulting in a large Kojima explosion around your AC. Any other next that get hit by this explosion will take some damage to their AP, as well as having their primal armor completely drained. I love the idea of this because it's a high risk, high reward mechanic, since resetting both the opponent's primal armor and your own means that both of you will be able to be killed incredibly quickly, so if you do use it, you better be confident in your own skill at the game. I never actually ended up using it during my playthrough, but it's a really interesting mechanic, and I think it's a great addition for players who are more used to the mechanics of Gen 4. And while we're on the topic of primal armor, I'm not 100% sure about this one, but it definitely seems like it's weaker here than it was in AC4. Either that, or enemies in For Answer are just considerably more dangerous, but I found my primal armor depleting much more often than in the base game, which made every single mission and arena match in For Answer much more intense than in Armored Core 4. Another new feature to For Answer is the Vanguard Overboost. This is quite literally a giant backpack of rockets that are used to deploy next into dangerous mission areas, and I have to admit that while they're kind of gimmicky, they're really cool. Getting to start a dangerous mission by flying into the mission area with 10 rockets strapped to your back is something that I didn't know I needed in these games, but I gladly welcome the addition. For Answer also sees the return of my favorite forgotten system in the Armored Core franchise, the Consort system. It's a little different this time, with you only being able to hire other Next from the arena ranks to work with you, but it's something that I was just really glad to see return. In terms of world building in Armored Core, not much can really top defeating an opponent in the arena and then immediately hiring them to help you out with a job in the field. It's one of those little things that really goes a long way in terms of fleshing out these worlds, showing you that these are actual pilots who exist outside of their one reason to appear for you in the game. It even helps with the risk and reward balance of Armored Core, allowing you to bring heavy-duty backup on your missions, but at the cost of a large portion of your pay for it. And I really hope that it doesn't just randomly disappear again after this game, because I feel like this is such a cool thing to keep around. Continuing with the positives, I had a much easier time following story in this game compared to Armored Core 4. After the events of AC4, the planet is left in a state of decay from the amount of pollution and hazardous waste given off by the Kojima particles of the Next during the war in that game. This has led to the surface of Earth becoming virtually uninhabitable, so the remaining corporations work together to build these giant airborne habitats to house the human population called cradles. But some of the less fortunate humans are forced to remain on the surface, leading to the formation of Orca, a rebel group of lynxes who are out to overthrow the corporations. And the main reason I was able to keep up with the story better was just because it was explained better than it had been in AC4. One example of this is the return of faction-specific mission briefings. It sounds like a small thing, but having different voice actors and distinct visual styles in these mission brief cutscenes goes a very long way in keeping things simple to understand, especially in comparison to Armored Core 4, where every mission intro looked the exact same and had the same woman just lore dumping on you. Another great addition made to the world of Gen 4 Armored Core in this game are arms forts. These are giant weapons, and I mean giant, that were created by corporations out of fear that the Next might one day turn on them and overthrow them. Arms forts have crews of thousands of soldiers operating them, and are massively scaled up weapons that far surpass the kind of firepower that Next are capable of. You'll be sent on some missions in this game where you have to fight them, and these are like the epic bosses of previous games being taken to an entirely new level. For me personally, battles against arms forts were definitely the highlight of my time with For Answer, and while I doubt that we'll ever get boss battles on this scale again in the series, I have to say that this is definitely an idea worth bringing back, because let me tell you man, nothing beats being in a super-powered mech and flying around this absolute behemoth just covered in weapons and chipping away at them one by one. But something that could continue further in the series is another new addition For Answer brings to missions. Ever since the first Armored Core, there have always been missions in these games where you'll be paid more for every enemy you kill along the way, but in For Answer, they introduce a new form of pay bonus where you'll get paid more depending on how quickly you complete the mission. And it should go without saying, but this kind of bonus is absolutely perfect for the Gen 4 games, and it also makes perfect sense from an in-world standpoint that clients would want their mercenaries to get in and out quickly to minimize risk. I have no idea how it took FromSoft this long to come up with this bonus, but I would love to see it return later on, as I love the intensity that it can add to an otherwise unexceptional mission. And speaking of quickly completing missions, I had a couple instances in For Answer where I would go into an eliminate all enemies kind of mission, clear everything out, and then kind of just sit there in an empty mission boosting around for a minute or two before the mission just randomly ended. I think that what's happening here is there's either some invisible timer for the mission for whatever reason, or more likely, I might be clearing out the enemies so quickly that the game isn't decrementing the remaining enemies in the code properly, so it'll just kind of hang like that. Not 100% sure what was going on with these instances, but just something that I figured I would mention because of how weird it was. And those of you that have been keeping up with the series already know what time it is. Arena time. I already mentioned earlier how much more straightforward getting into the arena was in this game, so that's a great start. And I also talked a lot earlier about the increased speed of 4Answer, and that faster pace really complements the arena here. On top of that, I was very pleasantly surprised early on when the second arena opponent in the game defeated me multiple times. Compared to AC4's arena, where I was maybe defeated like 5 times throughout the entire climb, it was great to get taken out a few times by one of the lowest ranking opponents in the game. And I had some incredibly intense matches throughout the entire climb of the ladder here. I didn't get stuck very often in this arena, and it's definitely not the hardest, but I had way more close calls than I have in a while. And if I'm being honest, this is probably the best arena the franchise has had since like Silent Line or AC3. The only major downside I had with this arena was that I won more matches than I ever have by ring out. And I don't even mean that I was able to force them out of the boundaries through clever use of mechanics or exploitation of the AI. I mean that they would literally just fly out of the boundaries. And not on the sides either. Opponents here would frequently fly too high into the air and past the altitude limit of the map, thus causing me to win the match by default. I think this only happened because I play very flight heavy, and it seems like the AI was trying to gain a higher elevation than me, causing them to leave the map, but I'm not really sure. Regardless of the reason, it's fun to win in the arena, but not as fun when you win by default. And if I'm being honest, I don't really have any specific stories or big finale for this video. The arena's 9-breaker went down on my first attempt, and the final boss of my playthrough, while a really fun double AC fight, wasn't anything all that spectacular compared to previous bosses of the franchise. Now, I did only play the game once front to back before writing the script, which only took me about 4.5 hours, but I am also like halfway through a second playthrough at the time of writing, and if any of my thoughts change over the course of my second run, well, they were already either edited or taken out if you got this far into the video, so everything I said here is something that I stand by even roughly 9 or 10 hours into the game. Overall, I found that Armored Core 4Answer is really just Armored Core 4, but refined in almost every way. The mechanics, the visuals, the world building, the arena, the balance of the game, everything that was okay in 4 is great here, and everything that was great is now fantastic. The only major negative with 4Answer is that I feel like it will make AC4 nearly impossible to go back to for those that have played it. It still has its problems, but as a lot of you probably already knew after the last video, it has become my new favorite game in the franchise, though much like I said in the AC4 video, I don't think it's the most well-made Armored Core game, but I do feel like this one comes a lot closer than Armored Core 4 did. So at the end of the day, I'm going to give Armored Core 4Answer a 7.9. But what do you guys think? Those of you that have played the game, those of you learning about it for the first time through this video, let me know in the comments below. And if you guys enjoyed the video, feel free to go ahead and leave a like, a comment, a subscription, anything to let me and the algorithm know that you did enjoy. It helps me out a lot, so I'd really appreciate it. And once again, I have pinned the poll for the next review series after Armored Core is finished in the comments below. If you've already voted on it before, then don't worry about it, but if you haven't and you care enough about what we talk about on the channel next, feel free to take a minute and just go check the box next to every franchise that you might be interested in and submit your opinions there. Even though we're getting close to the end of the Armored Core series, I'd love to still cover some games that you guys are interested in, and to do that, I would obviously love to get as many of your opinions as possible. And hey, if you enjoyed this video and you haven't seen them already, then you definitely enjoy the rest of my Armored Core videos, so I'll have those linked right here on screen.